so-called Generation Y, or the the Little Emperor generation, the Peach generation, whatever you want to call it. And it's clear to us that we are seeing some attitudinal shifts with these younger kids who are coming along now. They are more protected. They lead much more structured lives. They're all in uniforms, doing things, getting all these exams and tests and so on, and very much extrinsically motivated in a very structured environment to get to the next benchmark. And we are advising people, and it's actually very similar to what we talk about in the United States with the millennial generation. And by the way, the same thing with the parents, right? This is the whole new the new innovation in human resources in the United States is a bring your parent to work week, right? So these kids today in their 20s are calling their parents every day on their cell phone anyway. So I advise managers just to become part of the conversation. But many of these things are changing here as well. But we're seeing these changes, and I think it would be very important for a company now in Asia trying to train young talent is to be more of an in loco parentis employer. In other words, provide that structure, constant feedback, clear avenues to advancement. Map it all out for young people. Don't just have the kind of Wild West free agent entrepreneur mentality that worked so well back in the 80s and 90s and 00s, which work well for the people who are now in their 30s and 40s.
Are the traditional ways that we've looked for talent or young talent, job fairs, let's say at campuses, and headhunters to some extent? I mean, do they not really work in Asia?
Well, it's not that they don't work, but I think one of the things that we do know, and it varies again by country a bit, but to some extent, in, for instance, Korea and China, people are very sensitive to brand. So the brand of your company really matters to them because they want to be a part of something that is important and has status. So what we look at is how do you share with people what your promise is, what your brand is about, and why they want to be associated with it and why they want to contribute to it. So one of the biggest mistakes that companies often make is they assume, because they are a big global company, that their brand means something to young people in a particular country, and it may mean absolutely nothing. I remember GE, when it went to Germany, that is not necessarily the company that people, engineers, wanted to go to first. Now, so even though GE is a big global whatever, so you've got to, again, establish yourself as a brand that really matters and understand that might take a little while before people are going to come to you. So yes, you can have your job fair, but it may be that if you had it in the U.S., people would flock. Go to these other places, the population you're trying to attract,
different reception.
They don't know that brand. But one of the things we looked at is, for instance, an Indian company that was trying to hire in Uruguay. And why would a top superintendent want to join an Indian company? It's sort of the question that this company asked. And what they did is, first off, they had to bring the talent to India to see that it really is a big company in India, right? And it really means something here. And then the people saw that. But more importantly, they had to have local talent because the young people of that country want to see the prominent businessman in their area. They want to know that businessman wants to do business with that Indian company. So what the company had to do was also, you do need to grow the local talent because those are the role models. That's who they're going to aspire to be like, and they need to see that there's a connection between their country and whatever your company is.
But then once you get that talent in, and I know someone had addressed this before, once you get that talent in, there's always that fear that you grow that talent and another company is going to take that person away from you, right?
Yep. Well, I think that, particularly in China, that they have a problem in that they don't systematically grow talent, and they don't have these internal processes to get people from this point to this point. And you can also grow talent in ways that aren't quite so expensive, and work-based experience is a way to do that.
When we come back, for expats, Asia is still the land of opportunities.
The idea of poaching, companies that are worried about cultivating this talent and having them leave for others. I mean, how big of a problem is that in Asia?
Asia's phenomenal growth has top managers from around the world flocking to ride the boom. Western expatriates with international experience are more in demand than ever before.
We become much more valued assets for the people that we're working for, the companies that we're working for, because we understand how things work in different markets and different locations.
Telecom executive Nathan Bell originally planned to spend 2 years in Singapore and return to Europe. But with Asia flexing its economic muscles like never before, he just can't leave.
Having been here now going on 8 years, it's been a real change of a outward in to now more of an inward out. Very few of the foreigners who move here want to leave once they get here, and that says a lot about a place.
With the supply of talent still fairly limited, companies consistently poach each other's people.
I can't imagine anyone in corporate life in Singapore who hasn't been approached by another opportunity which they've had to seriously consider.
Thanks for joining us on Singapore Sessions. Now, just a moment ago, we were talking about how do you find the right talent, and in particular the young talent, and cultivate them within your company as you're operating in Asia. But the idea of poaching, companies that are worried about cultivating this talent and having them leave for others. I mean, how big of a problem is that in Asia?
I think Shanghai is thought to have the highest turnover rate in the world. I think they're big problems, but it's worth remembering this could be a problem anywhere. But it's also worth pointing out that there are entire industries that make their money out of hiring young people and losing them. Like all the law firms, all the accounting firms, all the consulting firms, right? You go into McKinsey, you spend 5 years there, you leave. They know you're going to leave, right? And yet still they make money on it. So, you can do it.
How is that possible?
The way they do it is that they're getting work of value out of you as you're learning. So you're learning by working. You're not learning sitting in a classroom.
They also put in place systems which can easily be taught to the next group of people coming in. McKinsey's famous for that. It's a little bit like the U.S. Army, which is one of the features of the armed forces is that everyone is taught a protocol which can easily be taught to the next person because they're constantly rotating new people in. So that's a kind of an institutional technique where it's sort of like a river, different water moving through, but the river stays there, right?
But is there a different way that a Western company would deal with it, and maybe since they have more experience in it, that they do have a different way than an Asian company that's just starting out?
I think it's the same anywhere on the planet, and that is establishing trust. Establishing long-term trust, which is a lot of what employer branding, which is a big new buzzword in the United States now that we all are convinced that the value of our company is not our bricks and mortar, it's our employees, so everyone's talking about employer branding. But I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Well, you mentioned trust, but is there more loyalty perhaps at all among Asian employees to their companies or not?
What we're really talking about is how the psychological contract has changed around the world in our relationship with our companies. How do we think about our employers? So what you want to be clear about is what do I get and what are you going to give me, right? What's the exchange? And there always is an exchange. That's the nature of work. And I think that what we need to understand is that we need to make the exchange in such a way that people want to stay with us. Maybe not forever in their career, but even if they don't come back to work for you, they might become a supplier for you. Because we're talking about relationship-oriented cultures.
Right.
If you've treated people properly, you have your alums, they're going to go in other places in the society. You may find yourself doing business with this person some other stage. So you want to have that long-term perspective. So you're not going to make me, for instance, only stay in China if the next interesting opportunity is in Vietnam or it's in New York or wherever it is. You're going to consider me for that. And I think what I hear when I interviewed a number of people, as I said, who went to very prestigious universities in the West and are Chinese, and the number of those people I meet that are discouraged that they are not being viewed that way, even though they're very specialized talent, very unique, they don't necessarily feel that they are given the same opportunities because what you get to do is based on who you know. And if you don't, they need to be exposed to the decision makers in wherever the headquarters are to see that they have a chance to be considered for that next stretch assignment just like somebody else.
Well, that flows into the topic of expats, right? Expat executives that come in and are running operations in Asia versus those who are locally hired who are rising through the ranks, and is there a perceived glass ceiling for those executives then, in which case either they deal with it and tolerate it, or they move on to another company, or they start their own companies, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a simple test. If you're a company and you're worried about this, are you promoting people from within, or are you hiring your talent from the outside? And if you're hiring them from the outside, the people underneath get the message and don't expect them to stay. Yeah.
Jay, what about you and your experience when you've talked to various executives in Asia? I mean, how important, let's say, is compensation to them being fulfilled in their jobs there? How important is it, for these companies to compensate well in order to keep their talent?
I think first and foremost is what Peter and Linda pointed out, which is the brand, the company. They believe so strongly in the company they work for, and this is true of Japan, Hong Kong, China, India, and I think that is overriding. It will override the money. Yes, they want to make money. They understand growth. They understand that they have an ability that they want to show off. I do also agree with Linda. They want it to be bigger. They want it to be more global in terms of what they can bring to the table. I'm not sure if money is the overriding factor as much as position, I think, is important. There is a hierarchy to what jobs they get and how they look at that. I don't know. I'd ask the question if money is the overriding factor. Different than in America, I think.
Well, you're right about status, because one of the things I see is frequently companies from the West who go into these parts of the world have to give people business cards. They have to add some other layers in there because that status matters when you're presenting yourself to others.
Right. Is there a blind spot among some companies or Western companies about, there's certainly a lot of flow in terms of, sending executives over to Asia, to run their operations, but what about exporting those executives out of Asia into other parts of the world?
That's what I was talking about, that these people who have been, went to the Harvard Business School or to Wharton or to Stanford and are Chinese, if they don't have a sense that they will be able to be, quote, expats elsewhere, that they're not global talent, that's when they're going to leave go to, I might be able to become the CEO of a Chinese company. So why do I just want to run the Chinese operation of this U.S. company or this European company, right? So they will jump at that point.
Up next, the future of global talent flows. Will Asia be the destination of the best and the brightest?
I think change is happening incredibly fast throughout Asia. They're watching brands all over the world. They're on the internet, and that's affecting them. I think this growth that we're talking about is not 5 years away. It's 2-3 years away.